Yeah, I'm all right. Where are you sitting? Obviously not at the end of runway 027 at Manchester at the moment.
I'm in my cellar, my little data cellar that I've made over lockdown. So I'm locked away, tapping away furiously,
Brilliant.
churning out dashboards.
Brilliant. So you and I, full disclosure here, you and I know each other, don't we? From about a year ago, just before lockdown.
I think it was pretty much 12 months ago that you first came to Manchester Airport to deliver our dashboard in a day training.
Yeah.
Which I think will prove that it's worked.
There you go. What else can you say? Obviously, fantastic training, but more importantly, fantastic delegates as well in MAG, as we like to call you, Manchester Airport Group. All right, Dave. So listen, I won't take any more of your glory. If you can share your screen, we'll get that on, and then
there we go.
We will make that live. So great, we can see hands, face, space.
Yes, there we go. So yeah, as Alex said before, so my name's Dave Scally, and I'm a performance and insights senior analyst at Manchester Airport. I've worked at the airport for about 4 years. I was previously a security team manager at the airport, and then it was just over a year ago the opportunity arose to join the insight team. In a previous life, I did used to work in IT. I used to be a web programmer in the good old days of ASP, classic ASP, and then I got out of it just as .NET was coming in. So I had a bit of a background in IT, and wherever I've worked, I've always been the go-to person for any sort of IT problems. I'll be absolutely honest, 13 months ago, I'd never really heard of BI, let alone Power BI. I didn't know what it was all about. I just had some IT skills. And I've sort of learned quite quickly about what it's all about, hopefully. When I started my new role just over 12 months ago, the airport was just starting to implement and starting to use Power BI. I think in 2019, I think the decision was made to move over to Power BI. And that's obviously when Ben, you came in and you did our training for us. So we were just getting to grips with Power BI and how it all works. That was early 2020. And then just as we were starting to start our journey, the airport started its worst crisis in its history. Suddenly we became super reliant on data, instant data analysis and insight. And this was coming about when we were trying to get our heads around Power BI and publishing and what do we do with that. So over the last 12 months, we've really hit the ground running, and everything we've learned through Power BI has been through necessity rather than choice. It's just been, need by need by need. We've had to learn that. So in a way, it's been good, because we've really got to grips with the technology and we've implemented it as soon as we can. So it's been good. So I'm going to show you some of the stuff that we've done and how we've got through our journey. It has been pretty hectic the last 12 months. I'll be honest, it's been crisis to crisis, but hopefully we've learned some good stuff. So hopefully some of you will enjoy seeing how we've done it. I appreciate some of the audience are way more advanced technologically than we are. There may be some beginners who are just starting the Power BI journey, so hopefully it might be some help for you guys to see how we've done and the way we've done it. So it's not going to be a showing off of technical expertise. It's more a little bit of a story of how we've found Power BI. Okay, so Power BI at MAG, we currently use legacy systems such as Oracle. Even still, a lot of analysis is done on Excel and PowerPoint. Even when we produce really good dashboards with great analysis, one of the common questions is, can we get that in Excel? So we've still got a bit of a way to get people converted away from Excel over to Power BI. But it was in 2019 that the business decided to move over to Power BI to create a new large data lake with all the business data in, so we could plug Power BI into it. And And as I say, it was the start of 2020. We had our dashboard in a day training, and we were just about to enter the UAT phase of testing our new data lake, which the developers had been working on over the last 12 months or so before I took on my new role. And then the 14th of March hit. Start of the year, the COVID crisis was getting quite serious, but it really hit the airport on the 14th of March. That was when Jet2 turned all their flights around mid-air on the way to Spain, and they turned back to Manchester. And that's when we had our first major crisis. I was in Nottingham at my sister's 50th birthday party, and I got a call to return home and start running some data because they needed instant reports on the data. Before that, it was, for many years, passengers had come, passengers went. The biggest concern that we had as an airport was whether we could keep the infrastructure going, to keep the queues down, to keep the capacity as it was. I mean, most of you will have used Manchester Airport and will have seen that the infrastructure is struggling, but we've got a new terminal coming up. So that was our biggest issue. It was the number of passengers we had and how to cope with them. And all of a sudden, we needed to figure out how to downscale the terminal operations as soon as possible. As you can see by that graph there on the right hand side, you can see how passenger numbers plummeted over that week between the 14th of March and the national lockdown. Numbers really did plummet. So the senior leadership team really needed that data straight away on passenger figures, passenger data, destinations, to try and make the decisions on it was literally on what terminals to shut. So all of a sudden it came to me to come up with some data, and it wasn't as easy as you think, because we didn't have any sort of really good dashboards for data. This is what we had to begin with. On the left hand side, we have we've got a basic piece of software that displays basic flight data. If you want to export that as a general user, you'd have to export it into Excel. You can only do it 7 days at a time. It does go into Oracle, but there's only a few users who've got access to Oracle. And even still, you're going to be pulling off just generic CSV files and things. So we didn't really have a really good tool to analyze flight data day to day. And that was when I decided that it was time to sort of put the dashboard in a day training to the test, and create a flight data dashboard. So as the country was going into lockdown, I was getting to grips with trying to make a flight data dashboard. I mean, the way this worked was we had the long-term plan for the cube and the UAT testing for all the big bits of data. So for the flight data, security data, retail car parks, but this was all put on hold. So a lot of the developers were furloughed. I was pretty much on my own, trying to figure out a quick solution using technology I wasn't used to. So I had to scramble together a solution pretty much on my own. So it was quite a good learning curve. And this is the solution I came up with. It's a bit of a convoluted process, but for people who are fairly new to Power BI and the Power platform, this might be a good little solution, a good example of how all these bits of technology can fit in together. So as you can see, that for the flight data dashboard that I created, this is how I got the data into a live data set. It came from Oracle. So as I say, we have this Oracle system already in place, but not a lot of users have access to it, and there's not an easy way to analyze the data. So every morning I set up an Oracle CSV export, and that gets emailed over to me first thing in the morning. Microsoft Flow picks up the email and then uploads it to our SharePoint site that we've got in our team. That CSV is stored in a SharePoint folder, and then half an hour later, give it a bit of a chance in case there's a delay, the Power BI data set refreshes with all the new data. So it's not an ideal solution, but that's the solution I put in place, just on my own in my basement during the peak of summer. Glorious days outside, I was figuring out this little solution. And this was just so that key stakeholders, such as our senior leadership team, retail operations, security, border force even, they wanted a quick solution to be able to look at flight data and just see what was coming in, what was coming out. And this is the solution I managed to put together. So this was my first major dashboard here. It's the flight data dashboard. So as you can see, it's a vast improvement on the blocks and rows of data that we had. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have realised that I've had to replace a lot of the data because some of it is a bit sensitive. So if you see a few blocks in it, it's not laziness, there is real data in there, but I've had to remove a few things. But based on those basic CSV files, we suddenly had a dashboard that people could query and have a look at what was going on. So these are the flight details for December 2020. And we can see on the left-hand side there, we've got departing passengers. We've got the load factors, which is a big thing for our airlines, is how full the planes are. So you can see there, that certain airline there that had quite a full load factor. And then that's a good indication of which airlines are really performing well at the moment. Something that we didn't really have access to was literally day by day how the passenger numbers were. Did we have a busy day? Did we have a quiet day? There you can see there we have a little peak before Christmas, then it gets quiet at Christmas. That's for the departing flights. On the right hand side there you can see we've got our arriving passenger figures. Again, the load factors of the flights. And arriving passengers there. And in the middle there we've got the total passengers. And for each airline you can see the arriving and departing passenger numbers for each airline. It does seem pretty basic that I'm showcasing this sort of dashboard. You'd think that we'd have a tool like this, but surprisingly enough, we didn't have anything like this at our disposal. We have aviation experts who deal with the airlines who've probably got a few tools at their disposal, but for the general users, for a lot of departments, they didn't have anything like this at all. So to have a live Power BI dashboard that was updated every day, it was quite a big thing for us. And there you can just see at a glance the peaks and troughs over time. So we can change the timescale here, and just see the drop off in passenger numbers as that came along. So it's quite a good way. People can just go through, see the data at their own leisure, and just to give you a good idea, these are just general graphs and stuff, but every so often you get a visual or a graph that really tells a story of what's actually going on. To explain what's happened to the aviation industry over the last year, I think this graph probably tells the story the most. As you can see here, there are passenger numbers over the past few years, slowly growing and growing. If you remember the Icelandic ash cloud that caused devastation amongst the aviation industry in Europe, that was that little blip there. And then that dark line there, that's the impact of lockdowns, of flight restrictions, flight bans and stuff. That was the impact that it had on our industry. And this graph is the same for every airport around the world. It's pretty devastating. As you can see there, we had a bit of a summer. Restrictions were lifted. Not a great deal, but we had a bit of a summer. But as you can see, the red line with the new lockdowns introduced since December and January, whereas we normally see a bit of growth this time of year, we're actually seeing numbers decline. So just in terms of telling a story to our stakeholders and getting the message across of how serious our industry, how serious the crisis is, I think that graph tells a story. And this is just off basic CSV files. For those more experienced Power BI developers, it'll seem quite obvious, but for us, having this sort of tool and visual at our disposal was quite unique for us. But we were also able to get some really good insight that we never got before. So this is a comparative day visual. So this compares the day of the week. So you can see normally day by day, week by week, every single day. So that, you know, the first Wednesday of October, we'd have a little dip, and it matches. It's quite interesting to see that it's the same each day of the year. No matter what day it is, you'll always find that the first Friday of a month is always the busiest, and that peak follows, and that trend follows consistently through the years, which is quite interesting. So if we were in normal times, we can then actually predict that, you know, that day there's the second Saturday of October, we're always going to have that dip. So using Power BI and these visuals has really sort of opened our eyes into some of the data that we've got, and really explained it. Obviously, you can't have a decent Power BI dashboard for an airport without a map, so we've got the token map in there as well, just showing our most popular destinations. So you can see from December to February, our most popular destinations, even though it was quiet, was the UK, Spain, and the United Arab Emirates. Once the UAE came out, ended up on the banned list, you can see that soon changed. So we can just see little visuals like that. It's not groundbreaking. It's not going to tell us anything that we don't really know, but it does tell us at a glance just how we're performing, and it just gives you that background information. Senior management aren't going to make key decisions based on these sort of dashboards, but what they can do is it can give them that general idea of where the trends are going. You know, just in little visuals like this, just see what the busiest days are, see are the passenger numbers going up, are they going down, just to give them that general awareness. So when they're making the key decisions, they've got that general background data there for them. And as Alex mentioned in the build up to this, we've got the fish tank visual, which is pretty popular. We've got a nice little fish tank visual for a bit of fun, just showing the most popular destinations using little mini sharks, because why not? And this is always a fun little visual that we use to show people where people are going, and you've got little tiny fish and stuff. So, you know, these dashboards don't always have to be serious. They can be a little bit of fun, and that's what we're trying to do. And everyone loves the fish tank, but they can be expanded to different people's needs. Just this week, our fire service asked for different types of categories of aircraft that we use in the airfield. For those of you who aren't aware, different sized aircraft have got different categories. So the bigger aircraft, so the A380, the big super jumbo, that is a category 10 aircraft, which means it needs a certain amount of firefighting equipment for it. And then as you go down, you need lesser sort of substantial equipment as you go down. So the fire service just wanted to know what types of aircraft we use in the airfield during the hours. So using the flight data dashboard, we can then build dashboards for the fire service for them to get those answers on, you know, what types of aircraft are used in the airfield. It's still in development, but I thought it was just worth showing you. So you can see that the Airbus A321neo is most popular at 8 o'clock in the morning. So there's little bits of insight that we can do using current data that is helpful for stakeholders like the fire service. I'll see if I can get the A380 up. So that's category 10. So there you go. So that's the A380. That's when it's been used in the airfield in January. So you can see there that it's using it at 1 o'clock. So I recommended to the fire service that they have their big curry lunches. They're pretty renowned for having the big curries and big chilies, that they should have it after 1 o'clock once the A380 is gone, because you don't want to be fighting any incidents on the A380 with a belly full of curry. So little funny insights like that is always good, but you know, it does serve a bit of a purpose for the operation. So that is one of the key dashboards that I was able to produce over the summer. As I say, it's just a really popular little dashboard because it just gives a lot of stakeholders just that basic information. So, you know, border force, retail operations, they can make more informed decisions based on the data that we've got. But for me, it was a bit of a learning curve in the way it was produced, using the CSV exports, uploading that to SharePoint, having data refreshes. We didn't know how that worked. Our BI team, who were furloughed at the time, had the data lakes in plan, but we didn't have that at our disposal, so we had to figure out the rough and ready way of doing it. We didn't know how to embed Power BI dashboards in SharePoint. We didn't know how premium workspaces worked, and we learned all that as we went along. So it was a really good way of learning things as we went along. And this is one of the main dashboards that we've produced. It's one of the more generic ones. We have produced a lot of dashboards for security, but unfortunately, due to the nature of them, we can't share them. But that's because I've come from a security background. I was able to produce a lot of dashboards for security, knowing what they'd need about trays, about rejects, queue times, when passengers are coming through boarding cards. And that's all automated self-serve data, which people in security are starting to use, which is really good. So that was our main dashboard, the flight data dashboard, which is in use at the moment, pretty popular. So that was all pretty good. The summer kicked in, we had a bit of a good summer, things were calming down a bit. And then the next major crisis hit, which was the flight bans, which started in December. Henk, as I mentioned before, it was actually the Netherlands who started this trend of banning flights. So we need to thank you guys for starting those flight bans. So it was the 20th of December when the flight bans started. It was the Netherlands who first announced that they were going to ban flights from the UK with not much notice. So it was pretty much a big shock for us. And then that was Sunday morning, and that announcement came about, and we were in our next crisis. And senior leadership team came to our team to ask what was the impact of that, what was it going to be. So that was when we had to create our new another urgent dashboard to try and figure out what the impact of flight bans were going to be, because a lot of countries, once the Netherlands started to announce that their flights were going, it was soon obvious that there was probably going to be other countries that would introduce flight bans. So we had to come up with a quick and easy solution to try and figure out the impacts of future bans, which is where I came up with the flight ban forecaster, which is probably the worst named dashboard you could ever think of, but it was in a bit of a rush, so we had to put something together quite quickly. By the Monday morning, a lot of countries were starting to announce more flight bans, and our senior leadership team needed to know what the impact of that was going to be. So we built this quick dashboard, which we have here, travel ban forecast. And this was a tool that our senior leadership team could access and look through themselves without having to ask us for analysis, because as soon as we would have provided analysis on the impact of a ban and sent it off to them, another country would have announced a new ban, and we would have always been behind. So that's when we created this dashboard here. So we downloaded a flight data for the next 2 weeks, put it into a Power BI model, and then put these filters on top, so people could figure out at their own leisure what the impacts of future bans were going to be. So as you can see here, we've got a few countries that have the filters applied, and based on the 2-week flight data model, the forecast, you could see how many passengers that we would have lost due to that. And this is the maximum passengers lost based on the size of the aircraft, but it gives you an idea of the scale of the problem. So you can see here we've got a few countries selected here. So the Netherlands, you can deselect them and see the change in flights there. Add new countries on. So our senior leadership team were given this dashboard early on the Monday morning, and they could play around with this dashboard to see if certain countries announced a ban, what was the impact going to be? You know, what was the big hitter? So what was the big country that we were worried that was going to announce a ban? What was that going to be the real big impact? So they could foresee what the impact was going to be. The biggest one was Spain at the time. So once you select Spain, you can see the maximum loss of passengers goes up to 69%, and we lost from 47% up to 72% of flights potentially lost. So they could have those discussions before those bans were announced to sort of make more guided decisions on what the plan of action was going to be. Are we going to close the terminal? Do we keep it open? What is the impact going to be? So this gave our senior leadership team those tools and devices to sort of preempt those decisions. So when a new country was announced, you know, they knew the impact straight away of it. So that was a really good tool for us to be able to deliver. It was quick and easy. It doesn't look great, but it does the job. It tells you the story of the impact of certain flights being lost on that particular day. So this was the 21st of December. You know, we were more informed, whereas previously the only other option available to us would be an Excel download, a pivot table, put it into a graph, put it into a PowerPoint, send it off. By the time you've done that, it's too late. So we're pretty proud of this little dashboard that we managed to put together. That was a really good example of how Power BI could be used to sort of help guide those decisions and give other people in the business who aren't analysts those tools to make those decisions.
Dave, can I just interrupt you, because we've got a couple of questions, and I think they're worth just running through.
Yep, go for it.
So a quick one from Mr. Anonymous, or Ms, or anyway, from Anonymous. How many rows of data are being posted into SharePoint from the flow, and is there a delay? Question mark.
Not at the moment. It is really quiet at the moment, so we're only getting 60 rows of data at the moment.
And it's one row of flight. Is that what we were thinking of there?
Yeah. So it's one
or
row
an
of
aircraft
flight.
movement. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the Power BI dashboard, it's got something. It's got over 10 million rows of data.
Yeah.
And the thing that really shocked me was how quickly it works, and how quickly you can analyze the data when it's going through. When it's going through 10, over 10 million rows of data, you can quite quickly filter through it, and that was quite.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. So, but 60 flight movements a day roughly in Manchester Airport at the moment going into SharePoint, and on a big day, that would be, I guess you'd have multiple hundreds, wouldn't you, of flight movements?
It'd be hundreds. I mean, we do have other flows set up for other bits of data, such as boarding card data, and tray data that we've got as a little mini solution.
Yeah.
There are thousands of rows of data, and I've set up the various flows to have a bit of a delay. So when it uploads, it's a half-hour delay before the data set refreshes. Just
in case.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't do what the government did and realise that Excel has a limit of, or do realise Excel has a limit of a number of rows, unlike the government and their COVID scenario, where they missed a load of COVID cases off, didn't they? Because they were all truncated off the bottom of Excel. A couple of things just saying, good story, Dave, and great visuals, and I think it's amazing as well. Question from Anthony: what software did you use for forecasting the impact of the flight bans?
Power BI.
Power BI, yeah, because it's you just uncheck. You just say Spain's closed, and therefore you can see the impact on your numbers, can't you?
No, that was that dashboard there. That is what we used. On Monday the 21st of December. That was what we used to give the story, and that's what SLT used to figure out the impact.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Okay, great to see a real self-service success story. Do you think you'll be refactoring and redesigning the data source and data refresh process in the future, or is it a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
I'd love my little step to son solution to stay, but no, the long-term plan is to get this data into a data lake. So I believe that should be ready over the next few months. The whole project's been delayed, but yeah, the idea is we're going to move over to a big dataverse. So all this data will be properly done by proper developers, not me in the basement. Those guys have been unfurloughed and they're working on that. So we'll have a huge data lake for us to plug into, and I can't wait for that to be in. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, so you have it, and that was always the plan. I remember the data was always going to go into the data lake. It was curated, it's managed, it's looked after by IT. If you need a measure, you go and speak to IT and they create you a lovely measure that's then standard across the whole of Manchester Airport Group, with the associated taxonomy with that as well. Brilliant.
Yeah, because it's, for those that don't know, we own Stansted Airport and East Midlands as well.
Don't forget East Midlands.
Yeah, they were one of the busiest airports in the world at some points during the crisis because of the amount of cargo they handle. Wow. So we have actually produced similar dashboards for Stansted and East Midlands, and obviously East Midlands is more focused on cargo. So, and that was, we've just changed the data source for each airport's flight data dashboard with a fish tank as well. With a fish tank.
Yeah. But people are loving Fish Tank, of course. And I always said, I'm going to put my anecdote in here. I always said to you, you got to take data and turn it into information. And that was one of the things I remember sitting down with you guys and training you guys on and saying, you got a load of data up there. Let's turn it into some info. And that's what Power BI does.
Yeah, it's, my boss is all about the story, tell the story of the data. Probably a little thing to mention here was, during the crisis, you can see how much numbers dipped. One of the biggest pieces that we did to get added value was I actually went to the terminal and asked every passenger, and unfortunately I spoke to every passenger departing one day to ask them why they were traveling, what was the story, and we got some really good stories on why they were traveling. So it's all well and good having the data, but it's the stories behind it, the actual insight, and hearing stories of why passengers were traveling, for sick relatives, they were moving flat, someone was pregnant, having a baby. That is another part of the data.
Yeah, cool. Listen, I'm going to let you carry on. A few more minutes, and I know you got a bit more to deliver before we wrap up. So thanks, Dave, for that brief interlude.
Yeah, so it was perfectly timed actually, because I'm going to talk about PowerApps. Because it's all well and good having a huge data lake that you can access, but what we found is that a lot of the smaller data is where we really find value. So there's a colleague of mine called Joe Dean, who's our Power App guru. After he returned from furlough, and I'd been doing a bit of Power BI work, I said there's something called Power Apps that I think we should really look at. Not sure what it does, but I think it's worthwhile looking into it. And Joe went away, and within a week he'd produced his first Power App. So Joe's fantastic. He's blown our mind with some of the stuff he's done. But it was once he looked into it was where we got the real value of what Power Apps can do. So for Power BI, you've got your massive data lake. It's all well and good, but a lot of the paper processes that we do contains a lot of really good data, but we don't have access to it. So a lot of paper forms that are filled in through the day, they might update a tracker with it, an Excel tracker, and then the paperwork gets filed, and there's no real way of analysing that data. And that's where in security we use a lot of paper. In airfield they use a lot of paper as well. So we've looked towards Power Apps to get a lot of that ground level data into some sort of data source to create dashboards on top of it. So I'll just show you some of the stuff that that we've done in Power Apps to get ground level data into Power BI. So This is a wildlife management app that Joe produced. We've got airfield people who go around and keep an eye on birds and flocks of birds and things and wildlife, and this all needs to be logged. So Joe created this app that you can track birds around the airport. It can take photos. It's got the weather in there as well from a data feed. So the airfield ops guys can take a picture of where the of the wildlife, but it's also got a GPS tracker here, so they can actually log automatically on a GPS log where that wildlife was, and I'll show you how that sort of comes into fruition shortly. We've produced an airfield ops dashboard, so our airfield team go around with iPads, whereas previously they'd use paper and things like that and log runway inspections. Now we have an app that does it for them, so they go around with their iPads, do the runway inspection, they submit it, and it goes into at the moment it goes into SharePoint, but this is one of the things that we can put into our data lake. So it's really the ground level data, we're getting that into a really good source, and you can see the kind of things that people are logging. So FOD is foreign objects, so bits of litter on the airfield can damage an aircraft. Whenever they find it, they can actually log this, and this is the sort of data that would never get the budget or attention for a massive software resource or a big application, but we can produce these really small power apps to get that ground level data to create some really powerful dashboards. Using those power apps as a way of getting that data, we can create some really good Power BI dashboards on top of them. So for the airfield status, that's the airfield status. You can see using that flight data dashboard, we can get some of the scheduled flights for the day, things like that. The runway inspections that were previously done on paper, we've now got a graph of them, and we can actually see when the runway inspections are being done and if they're compliant and things. In terms of the wildlife management that I showed you, based on those Power App inputs, we can actually go through and actually analyze properly where the wildlife is. So using that GPS input, we can actually go around the airfield and see where people have taken pictures. I think there's a good one down here. So there we go, we've got a GPS on the runway there. You can see the exact location of where this picture was taken, and there was a juvenile swan that was trapped in a lagoon, and that that's an issue that we need to deal with. There we go, someone doing a little bit of a testing there, but these are Power BI dashboards that are now feeding the input from PowerApps, and we're getting some really good data from it. We've got other uses that we could do, such as a trolley tracking app. So when we spot a stray trolley around the airport, we can just take a picture of where it is. It logs the GPS location on site, and then our trolley teams can go around. They can look at a Power BI dashboard, figure out where all the stray trolleys are, and do things like that. So it's really simple ground level data that we can collect and actually make really useful decisions from it and do things from there. So the Power BI dashboards are great, and it's great if you've got the big data lakes behind it, but we found that PowerApps has been a really good way of getting the insight and the story about the smaller bits of the airport operation. And because it's on PowerApps, we could deploy it on phones, so we can deploy it on a wide scale basis and get people to get that sort of data. So the PowerApps bit has been another big huge bit of our story. So just to finish off, really, that's what we've done over the past 12 months, which has just gone past in the blink of an eye. But it's really becoming established now at Manchester Airport, and the Manchester Airport Group, we're really adopting it. Week by week, we're developing new dashboards, involving new stakeholders, and we're really getting into it. One of our most popular users of our dashboards, because you can see that through the analytics at the back, is our MD, Karen. She is one of the biggest users of our dashboards. She's really driven by data. She gets it. So we're really lucky that we've got someone in a senior position who really understands what we're trying to do here and gives us the support and backing. And she gives the onus on her team to ask us for the data, to ask for a dashboard, to work with us and see what we can do. We've just started internal forums to get best practice and adopting new ways of working. We work alongside the other airports in the group, so we work really well with Stansted and East Midlands, collaborating on new ideas, and we also work with people like Heathrow. We had a really good session this week with Heathrow about how they use PowerApps and their dashboards. So it's not just us, it's across the industry. So it's a really exciting time for us. And as you can see there, that's our new terminal. It's ready to go. It looks absolutely amazing. And I think that the data insight that we're getting now, the Power BI dashboards, the self-serve, the insight and action, we really are getting Manchester Airport into a place where we're getting a culture of data and technology that is really matching the brand new terminal that we've got. So it's a really exciting time at Manchester Airport. Really proud of the stuff we've done with the team we've done. It really is hope for the future. So yeah, that's our Power BI story.
Brilliant, thanks Dave. I'm not sure if Alex is back with us. Can't wait to get out traveling, of course. Like most people, we're all frustrated at home. Just one last question, and I could probably answer this, but I'll let you do it. So it's from Mark Drury. Thanks, Mark. With a data lake, do you think the restrictions on having the data in a lake may restrict end users from developing dashboards? Sometimes the people in IT are not the best people to go and create the dashboard.
Yeah, exactly. We're pretty keen that we create the dashboards and the Power Apps with the operation. You know, IT are great at building the big data lakes, the big robust things. If people want to create a little dashboard using Power Apps and the little method we've done with the CSV exports and stuff, just for their own little use, fine, do it. You know, we've got that low level solution in place. If people want to do it, and if they want to move that solution from the CSVs and the SharePoint lists up to a bigger data lake, if it's being used and they've got the data, that can then they can work with IT to get it into the data lake.
Yeah, and of course, I guess what will happen is, you know, the data lake is the curated data. It's the data that is the loved, managed data from, you know, Manchester Airport Group. That's exposed however you want to expose that, obviously, you know, in a Power BI data set or analysis services or whatever, and you just teach people how to connect to that and then let them go and build their own reports, if you like, and there may be some standard reports or apps that are produced by, you know, Manchester Airport, produced by Flight Operations Group, say, that detail the flights in and out and where they're going, and they're the standard things. But then you give them the opportunity, of course, perhaps to connect directly to that data lake via Power BI for anybody who's a report developer. And of course, these days you've got composite models, so you could bring in, you know, external data of flight operations from Heathrow and compare and contrast between Heathrow and Manchester Airport and see perhaps where they're doing and they're doing well and you're not, and vice versa, of course. So I guess there's a few nuances to that question.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Alex, mate, how are you doing? He's talking, but I can't hear him. He's still talking, but I can't hear him. And he's not muted.
I'm still live, so do you need to put Alex live?
No.
Come on, Ben. Come on.
Come on. Do you know, I hate Teams live. I mean, typically not. I'm not live, and you can hear me. No, you see, Alex, you're live, and we cannot hear you, mate. Type what you want me to say in the chat. Go to someone else. Go to me. We're not going to me. I haven't got my proper t-shirt on. All right, what do we need to wrap up, Alex? It's a question of wrapping up with everybody. I'll send me live. I wish I'd worn my t-shirt, but I haven't done. Thank you very much for attending Power BI Live. Alex, could you share a desktop with who we've got on next? I can't remember. Come and join us the last Thursday, of course, in March, 4 weeks from now, 5:30 for 2 great speakers. Power BI Lunch and Learn is going to start again sometime soon, so look out for the notes on that. Sheb, if you know anything about that, type that into a WhatsApp now for me, but I suspect in 2 or 3 weeks time we'll be starting Lunch and Learn, or we'll be starting it in March. Lunch and Learn, slightly different. It's 2 half-hour sessions, quick, pointed, very much on just some Power BI features. I'd like to thank Alex for hosting this, Henk for a wonderful session on visualizations, tooltips, and we learned a lot of great stuff in there. And Dave Scally, it's been lovely to have you here to take us through the story of MAG and what you've done with Power BI and PowerApps, and in a year, right? And pretty much, other than a little bit of training from me, a couple of days I spent with you on and off, you're self-taught, great dashboards, and the beautiful thing is, you know, they tell a story, and that data's been picked up, as you say, by your MD. And she uses that data to help drive the business. And I think that's a fabulous story. And I love the PowerApps stuff, all this stuff about airfield operations that we don't know anything about, but, you know, swans, kestrels, all the other stuff, the firefighters and the categories of aircraft and things like that. Just brilliant. So thank you very much for everybody. Thank you for your questions, everybody. This will be on the YouTube channel. So you can rewatch it. We'll split it up. You can rewatch it at your leisure, and we will see you 4 weeks from today. Thanks very much, everybody. Good night. Goodbye. Alex is waving, but you can't see him or hear him.